Canadian Bulldog from Wrestling Merchandise and Memories. That's merchandiseandmemories.com. July is Rivalries month at Merchandise and Memories, and as part of that, today we're counting down the top 50 rivalries of Macho Man Randy Savage, In counting down the top 50 Macho Man Randy Savage rivalries, we're looking at how prominent was the rivalry, what type of stage did it play out on, how memorable were the matches and or segments, and how much did this rivalry advance either person's career. Just before we get started, wanted to let you know that Wrestling Merchandise and Memories has more than 100 unique and conversation-starting top 50 lists on its site. Check it out at bit.ly/top 50 lists. Number 50. Although it may not sound like Doink the Clown had much of an issue with Randy Savage, the two engaged in a series of matches in 1993 on both house shows and Monday Night Raw. Interestingly, Savage was aided in some of these matches by the Macho Midget, an individual who would later become Dink the Clown. Number 49. Before either made their fame and fortune in the WWF, King Kong Bundy and Randy Savage were fixtures in Memphis. At one point, Savage was teaming with the likes of Jerry the King Lawler as they attempted to rid the company of Bundy, Rick Rude, and other villains. Number 48. Kevin Sullivan was one of Randy Savage's first opponents when he arrived in WCW. After defending Hulk Hogan, Savage was targeted by Sullivan and various members of his Dungeon of Doom faction. Savage and Sullivan battled several times on Monday Nitro. Number 47. Although basketball bad boy Dennis Rodman was initially on the same page as Randy Savage during their time together as part of the NWO, a rivalry later developed. After Savage called Rodzilla out during Monday Nitro, a match was held at Road Wild 1999 where they had a wild brawl around the ring. Number 46. Wrestling superstar Virgil would often get involved during the height of Randy Savage's rivalry with the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase. The two wrestled in a televised match, with Savage winning but setting up an attack by the $1 Million Man. Number 45. Big Van Veta never had a true one-on-one contest with Randy Savage, but they did feud briefly in tag teams, Savage with Hulk Hogan and Vader with Ric Flair. This also led to a match of sorts on an entirely different stage, the Bash at the Beach episode of Baywatch. Number 44. WWE Hall of Famer Jeff Jarrett and Randy Savage are both second-generation stars that worked in Memphis, WWF, and WCW at the same time, but they never really had much conflict in any of those promotions. It wasn't until 2004, when Savage briefly worked in TNA, that he started a rivalry with The Chosen One. Number 43. Dino Bravo and Randy Savage had a program while both men were at their respective peaks, yet the rivalry was limited to house shows in Canada. Bravo began the series by besting WWF champion Savage by countout in Toronto, and then followed up with a series of matches in Toronto and Montreal. Number 42. A family feud involving the Gilbert family took place in 1984 when Randy Savage took on international champion Eddie Gilbert at the Mid-South Coliseum in Memphis. Savage's brother Lanny Poffo aided the Macho Man, while Eddie's father Tommy Gilbert seconded his son, leading to a series of wild tag team matches. Number 41. WWE Hall of Famer Arn Anderson was targeted by Randy Savage once the two went to a time limit draw on WCW Saturday Night. Later, they found themselves on opposite sides of a tag team feud, Anderson with his best friend Ric Flair, and Savage with his frenemy Hulk Hogan. Number 40. WWE Hall of Famer The Undertaker tested his mettle against Randy Savage in his early days in the WWF. Savage was mostly substituting at the time for an injured Ultimate Warrior when they did battle. In later years, the two even formed a temporary tag team. Number 39. Southern wrestling legend Austin Idol was the international champion when Randy Savage came to Memphis and began feuding with Idol. The two met several times in the famed Mid-South Coliseum, with Idol often getting disqualified for using dirty tactics in their matches. Number 38, WWE Hall of Famer the Junkyard Dog had a high-profile match with Randy Savage in November 1985 when the two met in the final round of the Wrestling Classic pay-per-view, and JYD was victorious. Junkyard Dog also challenged the Macho Man for his Intercontinental title several times. Number 37, according to Savage's brother Lanny Poffo, Randy Savage once proposed a 2-year feud with WWE Hall of Famer Shawn Michaels, which ultimately never happened. Still, the two clashed several times in the early 1990s for both Savage's WWF World Championship and Michaels' Intercontinental title. Number 36, while Miss Elizabeth was Randy Savage's manager and wife, both on and off screen, she and Savage had conflicts during their careers. In the late 1980s, Elizabeth sided with Savage rivals Hulk Hogan and Dusty Rhodes, and several years later in WCW, she turned on Savage during a program with Ric Flair. Number 35, WWE Hall of Famers the Rock and Roll Express, Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson battled Randy Savage in Memphis along with Lanny Poffo and Angelo Poffo. At the height of the feud, Savage piledrove Morton through a table, believed to be the first time that spot was ever done. Number 34, Exotic Adrian Street was one of the main opponents of Randy Savage during Savage's first run as a babyface in Memphis in 1985. The two battled throughout the territory, and Street even managed to pin Savage cleanly during a big match in February of 1985. Number 33, WWE Hall of Famer Rowdy Roddy Piper and Randy Savage had a number of matches together. Their rivalry began in the mid-1980s when Savage was still Intercontinental Champion. Later, when the Macho Man was part of the NWO, he and Hot Rod battled it out in WCW. Number 32, Dutch Mantel had quite a rivalry with Randy Savage during their days in the Memphis territory, when Savage was the NWA Mid-America Champion. At one point, the two had a wild no disqualification match where the action often spilled outside of the ring. Number 31, WWE Hall of Famer Bobby the Brain Heenan often had members of his Heenan family go after Randy Savage, including Andre the Giant, King Harley Race, and King Haku, with Savage often getting the best of them. The two also clashed when both were color commentators. Number 30, speaking of Bobby Heenan family members, WWE Hall of Famer Ravishing Rick Rude battled WWF champion Randy Savage several times in mid-1988. And years before that, the two battled in Memphis when Rude was part of Jimmy Hart's first family. Number 29, when Lex Luger returned to WCW in 1995, Randy Savage was among those who were skeptical of his true intentions. The two battled at the World War III pay-per-view that year, and again when Savage joined the NWO and Luger was still siding with WCW, including a match at 1998's Sold Out. Number 28, Jimmy Hart was another manager that was a constant thorn in Randy Savage's side. The bad blood began in Memphis when the WWE Hall of Famer was in charge of his first family, and then continued on to the WWF, where the Mouth of the South managed the Honky Tonk Man, the Hart Foundation, and other Randy Savage rivals. Number 27, Ron Garvin crossed paths with Randy Savage when the two were in International Championship Wrestling. It was actually Garvin who told the world that Savage was actually Randy Poffo. In addition, Garvin dressed up Pez Whatley up in drag as Miss Macho Man. Number 26, WWE Hall of Famer Big Boss Man battled Randy Savage as one of his first challengers when the Macho Man captured the WWF World title in 1988 when he was managed by Slick. Eventually, the Slickster pooled his resources and sent both Twin Towers after the Macho Man. In turn, Savage recruited his Mega Powers partner, Hulk Hogan. Number 25, WWE Hall of Famer Yokozuna was last in the ring with Randy Savage in the 1993 Royal Rumble, with the Sumo Star winning that match. Later, when Yokozuna became WWF champion, he battled Savage on house shows and on Monday Night Raw. Number 24, Avalanche, also known as Earthquake, was another big man that Randy Savage clashed with. Savage took on Avalanche as part of Kevin Sullivan's 3 Faces of Fear, including a match at the Uncensored pay-per-view in 1995. They also did battle when he changed his name to The Shark. Number 23, WWE Hall of Famer Andre the Giant was yet another big man that Randy Savage did battle with. As the Macho Man prepared to win the WWF World title at WrestleMania 4, Andre was constantly a thorn in his side. They met both in singles matches and tag teams, including the main event of SummerSlam 88. Number 22, Crush was being mentored by Randy Savage until the big man from Kona lost a match to WWF champion Yokozuna. Crush blamed Savage for the loss, then sided with Mr. Fuji and battled the Macho Man in a Falls Count Anywhere match at WrestleMania 10. Number 21, when WWE Hall of Famer Sting captured the WCW World title from Hulk Hogan, few realized that Hogan's NWO ally Randy Savage would be the one to unseat the Stinger, but that's what happened at Spring Stampede in 1998. The two met several times after then, including matches on WCW Nitro and Thunder. Number 20, WWE Hall of Famer Bruno Sammartino, who had retired but was working for the WWF as an announcer, confronted Randy Savage after the Macho Man crushed Ricky Steamboat's larynx in 1986. Sammartino shockingly choked out Savage, leading to a pair of main event matches between them at Madison Square Garden. Number 19, Akeem had known Randy Savage since the African Dream was Crusher Broomfield in ICW during the early 1980s. But by the end of that decade, Akeem was in hot pursuit of Savage's WWF World title. He challenged Savage at house shows and on TV before they had the big Mega Powers versus Twin Towers blow-off feud. Number 18, WWE Hall of Famer Bret Hart had one of his first breakout matches with Randy Savage during their classic 1987 bout on Saturday Night's Main Event. They would face each other again when Hart was WWF champion during a tour in Japan, and then they had a series of matches when both were in WCW. Number 17, WWE Hall of Famer Brutus Beefcake was a victim of Randy Savage's heel turn in 1989, with Savage and manager Sensational Sherry attacking the Barber on national television. This led to several matches that year, a tag team match at SummerSlam 89, and even more matches when both were later in WCW. Number 16, WWE Hall of Famer Kevin Nash first did battle with Randy Savage during their respective WCW runs. Nash first targeted Savage as he formed the NWO, and later challenged Savage for his WCW title at the Great American Bash 1999. They were also on opposite sides during Savage's one TNA match. Number 15, unlike Nash, WWE Hall of Famer Razor Ramon's conflict with Randy Savage began in the WWF when the bad guy cost Savage his WWF World title. Later, they had issues in the WCW versus NWO confrontation when Ramon was Scott Hall, as he was when Savage faced Hall in his lone TNA pay-per-view match. Number 14, Bad News Brown claimed in 1988 that Randy Savage's manager, Miss Elizabeth, had granted WWF President Jack Tunney favors to avoid giving Bad News a title shot. As a result, Brown had several wild street fight matches for Savage's WWF title on the house show circuit. Number 13, WWE Hall of Famer Hacksaw Jim Duggan was the reigning king of the WWF towards the end of 1989 when Randy Savage transformed from Macho Man to Macho King thanks to a victory over Duggan. After taking Hacksaw's crown and cape, Savage radically transformed the look of the King and held back Duggan in their rematches. Number 12, WWE Hall of Famer Dusty Rhodes was the Macho King's next conquest after defeating Hacksaw Jim Duggan. The philosophical differences between the elitist Macho King and the common man Rhodes made for a great clash of styles and culminated in a mixed tag team match at WrestleMania 6. Number 11, WWE Hall of Famer Tito Santana was defeated by Randy Savage for the Intercontinental Championship in early 1986. Over the next year, Savage would constantly turn back Tito's challenge for the title, besting him in several no disqualification matches. Number 10, WWE Hall of Famer George the Animal Steele had a long rivalry with Randy Savage, including matches at WrestleMania 2 and spanning several episodes of Saturday Night's Main Event before culminating at WrestleMania 3 when Steele was in Ricky Steamboat's corner. At the heart of the conflict was Savage's manager, Miss Elizabeth. Number 9, WWE Hall of Famer Jerry the King Lawler's feud with Randy Savage began as a real-life cross-promotional rivalry. Savage's family promotion ICW challenged Lawler's CWA. Eventually, they had several matches throughout Memphis, including more than one steel cage match and a loser leaves town match that the King won. Number 8, WWE Hall of Famer, the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase, began his feud with Randy Savage before they even battled in the finals of the WrestleMania 4 World Title Tournament. The two met on Saturday Night's Main Event, and then after the Macho Man bested the $1 Million Man, the rivalry led to a tag team match at the very first SummerSlam. Number 7, WWE Hall of Famer the Honky Tonk Man had a conflict with Randy Savage that became deeply personal when Honky pushed Savage's manager Miss Elizabeth to the ground during an episode of Saturday Night's Main Event. The ensuing rivalry for Honky Tonk's Intercontinental title was one of the biggest feuds of the mid-1980s. Number 6, WWE Hall of Famer Jake the Snake Roberts gave Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth a live cobra as a wedding gift. I personally would have preferred a waffle iron. And things only got worse from there. Tying up Savage in the ropes, Roberts coaxed a cobra to bite Savage on the arm, forcing the then retired Macho Man to return to active competition. Number 5, WWE Hall of Famer Diamond Dallas Page was one of the few WCW originals willing to take on the NWO, which Randy Savage was a part of. Together, the two headlined several pay-per-views, with Savage's reunited manager Miss Elizabeth and DDP's wife Kimberly both getting involved in the conflict at various times. Number 4, WWE Hall of Famer The Ultimate Warrior and Randy Savage first paired off when Macho Man was WWF Champion and Warrior was the Intercontinental Champion. But the bigger feud culminated at WrestleMania 7 when Warrior forced Savage to retire. Unretired later, the two had one final go in the main event of 1992's SummerSlam. Number 3, WWE Hall of Famer Ric Flair taunted Randy Savage in 1992 by saying, "She was mine before she was yours," as the two prepared for a hellacious match at WrestleMania 8, alluding to a pre-existing relationship with Savage's wife, Miss Elizabeth. Later in WCW, they would feud again, this time with Elizabeth dumping Savage in favor of the Nature Boy. Number 2, WWE Hall of Famer Ricky the Dragon Steamboat began having bad blood with Randy Savage in a televised match in late 1986 in which Savage crushed Steamboat's larynx with a ring bell. This set up a lengthy rivalry that culminated in their iconic Intercontinental title match at WrestleMania 3. And the number 1 Randy Savage rivalry is Hulk Hogan. One of Randy Savage's first feuds in the WWF was with the WWE Hall of Famer, who was in his first reign as WWF World Champion. Then they formed the Mega Powers, a top babyface team that would last until early 1989, when Savage became jealous of Hogan lusting after Elizabeth, This led to the main event of WrestleMania 5 and several other main events after that, including in WCW, where they traded the world title more than once. So, what did you think? Which ones did we miss? Which ones did we misplace? Let us know in the comment section below, and be sure to subscribe to the Wrestling Merchandise and Memories YouTube channel for lots more great content.